So we are still in kind of the introductory phase of this course, somewhat, and we did have a pretty abstract lecture last time on moral realism and anti-realism and cognitivism and non-cognitivism. None of that today. So we're going to look at practical aspects of morality from a scientific perspective. What does psychology have to say about morality? And more than you might think. And it actually turns out that we're going to revisit our theory, morality is cooperation. And that just makes so much sense to me. And regardless of what else we want to put on top of, what kind of theoretical perspective we want to adopt, they're just, I mean, social creatures. There are just certain limitations that are imposed on our behavior by being part of a society. And that's just a kind of logic. There's a logic to cooperation that has to be followed. And it also turns out that um, um, we have intuitions, we have moral intuitions, social intuitions, another way to put that. And we'll be looking at that and evaluating that. And I like this material a lot. I mean, this is just basic stuff about how people get along and why they need to get along. And that's what we'll be doing today. We will be revisiting some of the things that we said in the introductory lecture because I want to reaffirm that. And so the first few things we go over are going to be kind of looking back over some of those principles from morality as cooperation. But that's what we'll be doing today. I hope everybody's doing well. And it is good to see you guys for sure. All right. So let's get started. And so let's get started back with our definition of ethics and morality. And remember, we're going to use these terms interchangeably, although we don't have to. We can be more specific if we wanted to, but there's no reason for that as far as I'm concerned. So ethics and morality concern obligations to other people based on valuations of right and wrong. Some things are right and some things are wrong. And we express moral approbation or disapprobation depending on how other people's actions affect us. This has a lot to do with justification. So if I engage in behaviors that potentially impact you in a negative way, I should explain myself, and I should explain myself in a way that you can understand and at least potentially assent to. And if I don't, the consequence of that will be our relationship may devolve into conflict. And if we're involved in some type of conflict, we're not going to be able to, one, I'm not going to be able to cooperate with you. Two, conflict can spiral into violence, and that's bad for everybody. And I know what you're thinking. Some of you are thinking, but I'm really tough. I can I go to MMA stuff and I practice jujitsu and I listen to Joe Rogan and I don't mind, but here's a problem. Violence is unpredictable. And even if you have an extraordinary advantage over and anybody who's been in a fight or fought professionally, or even if this is just something you do in the dojo, I mean, things go wrong. And it's very easy to be hurt. And sometimes it's very easy to be hurt in a way that can affect you for the rest of your life. And so this is something you want to avoid. And quite frankly, people can team up against you. So no matter how tough you are, violence is never a sure thing. And not only are we deprived of the potential for cooperation, once our relationship spirals into violence, there's always a danger, right? There's always a danger that I could be irreparably harmed. And we want to avoid that. And if you look at even in nature and, we think, oh man, nature's super violent, and it can be. But think of animals, like even like apex predators, like bears and lions and things. There will often be territorial disputes between animals, right? And how will those go down in practice? Well, they don't always go right to violence. And in fact, when you look at animal behavior, what animals will do is animals will puff themselves up, they'll yell, they'll growl, they'll try to intimidate the opposition. That's a much better strategy than going right to, attacking. It's a far less dangerous strategy, because if you can intimidate the other party, then you can avoid all of the downsides associated with actual fighting. Because even if you prevail in the fight, you may be injured, and of course that will render you vulnerable to being attacked by somebody else, right? So even what we see in nature is that uh, avoid violence if you can. So one way to avoid violence is to kind of set up a kind of de facto set of rules that we all abide by. And the biggest rule is that if, I engage in a behavior that has the potential to, impact your welfare in a negative way, I need to explain myself. I need to show you that I'm not really trying to threaten you. And I need to try to make amends for that in the best way that I can. And then hopefully I can repair the damage that's done to the relationship, because relationships within a social organization are extraordinarily valuable. Right? So this is another way of saying this is about the ethics of cooperation, or the logic of cooperation. And one way of looking at ethics, it's not the only way, and we will look at ethics from many perspectives, but I'm going to keep going back to this. Ethics is at its essence about people trying to learn how to cooperate with each other. And there's a logic to cooperation. It's not arbitrary. It's not like we can do whatever we want to do. It's not like my opinion matters more than anybody else's. No, when we cooperate as a society, as social beings, there are certain limitations on our behavior. And that's just human nature. Right? So in order for social organizations to function, and in order to reap the benefits of reciprocity, we have to follow rules. And however you want to visualize these rules, if you don't learn to follow these rules, you're going to have a very difficult time. Very difficult. You can be ostracized. You can be punished. People can respond violently to you. And at the very least, you're going to run out of cooperative partners, and things are going to be just tougher for you than they have to be. So ethics can be understood as a collection of biological and cultural solutions to the problem of cooperation. There is a biological side to this. We do have moral intuitions. We do, as social animals. And so ethics can be understood as the collection of biological and cultural solutions to the problem of cooperation recurrent in human social life. So why should we take ethics seriously? I know that I gave you this material before, but I want to really go back so we get this, because I'm all about this. The biggest justification for taking ethics seriously and studying ethics is it's going to help you. It's in your long-term interest to do so. It is in your long-term interest to be a good person. It just is. You'll be a better cooperator. People will like you more. You'll be more successful. It's not the only reason to take ethics seriously, but it's a good reason, and it's a reason that anyone can relate to. I know it's kind of counterintuitive, but we'll unpack that. Okay? We'll unpack that. Because ultimately, why do people do anything? Why do people do anything? It's in their interest to do. That's just how life works. Why should you do something that's not in your interest to do? You shouldn't. And so behaving ethically is not a burden. It isn't. It's not something, oh my God, I have to do it and it's really hard. No. When you perfect these skills of treating people with respect and understanding people and being able to see things from their perspective and attend to their needs and assert yourself in a positive way, this all makes your life easier, not harder. So that's a way to think about it. This is a skill set, and if you perfected this skill set, your life will be easier and richer and better in every sense of the word. Right? I mean, we tend to look at ethics and moral duties as burdens, but they're not burdens at all. It is true. It is true. Sometimes you will have to set aside your immediate desires and impulses. Sometimes you have to tell yourself no. And that can be difficult for some people. But in the long run, it will help you. And we can think about it like this, right? We can talk about enlightened self-interest or your long-term self-interest. Everybody seeks to maximize their own well-being by seeking opportunities that elicit personal benefits. I say everybody, and when I give a generalization like that, please, I mean, I know like some of you are going to think, but what about, you know, these psychological oddities and people, sociopaths, and no, when I say everybody, I mean, like we look at there's a spectrum of human behavior, the vast majority of people, and I could just say the vast majority of people, but there it is. So the vast majority of people seek to maximize their own well-being. They seek opportunities that elicit personal benefits. You should think about yourself. Everybody should think about themselves. Look, if you're not going to think about yourself, who is? That's not a vice. It's not a vice to be concerned with yourself, your family, your friends, the people that you care about. You should be thinking about them. You should be thinking about yourself. But how should you be thinking about yourself? Should you be saying, well, I'm more important than anyone else, and I need to get what I need, and if I have to stab people in the back, well, that's what I'll do. No, that's not the way you should be thinking about yourself. You should be thinking about yourself as a member of a family, as a member of a society, working alongside with people who are in a position to help you, to enrich your life. Nothing wrong with that. So here's the thing. If you really want to maximize your own well-being, like it's a serious story, I want to live a good life. I want to live a happy life. I want to live a rich life. You know, there's all kinds of people on the internet, you know, they're preaching the gospel of richness and all of this stuff. Well, here's a very simple thing that you can do that's going to work. How do I know it's going to work? Because it's been proven thousands of years. I mean, it's just basic advice, right? You should do best. You should do what is best for yourself over the long term. Over the long term, you can't see what is good right now, because what is good right now might not be good for you in the long term. So you have to say, I want to take the long view of my life lived over time, right? So we all know this. There are things I want right now that might not be good for me later. I want to eat this burger right now. I want to eat 2 of them. That might not be the best thing for me over time, though, right? So what should I do? If I really care about my own self-interest, what should I do? If I really want to maximize my own self-interest, what should I do? Should I eat the burger? Should I go back for seconds?
Maybe like once a week is good.
Yeah. But Alexa, I need to learn to say no, don't I? Sometimes. I can't eat this thing every time it pops up on the menu. I can't do that. I mean, I could, but that's not going to help me maximize my own self-interest. It's actually not good for me. And we even say things like that. You go like, this thing is not good for me. Why are you doing it then? See, this is what I mean. It's right to pursue your own self-interest. So why do we do so many things that are against our self-interest? It's weird, right? Kind of weird. Like, this is not helping you. This is counter to what you want to achieve in the long term. So why do you do it? So it's the first lesson we need to learn is that, like, not everything that you want is good for you. Okay, I know what you're thinking. You're going like, yes, short-term gratification, sacrifice temporal pleasure for long-term benefits. You're like, well, shouldn't everybody learn this by the time they're 5? Yes, they should, but they don't, apparently. So just in case, just throwing this out there, not everything that you want is good for you. Okay? So what is good for you, though? So when you think about the longest frame of reference, your long-term self-interest, we want to think, how does ethical behavior fit into that? Well, I really want you to be honest. It's not really, if you think about what's in it's not really just about you, is it? Like, there's probably none of you are thinking like, it's just me and it's only me and I don't trust anybody. I mean, people say that and they get tattoos that say that, trust no one. And, people have been hurt and they carry that pain. And I get that. I understand it. But if you're really honest with yourself, you think like, other people will be important to my life. They will. Your friends, your family members, people who are close to you, even your coworkers, fellow members of society, sometimes even strangers can be important in your life. You'll want to pursue projects and you need other people. You need to cooperate with them to achieve what you want to achieve. So there's no way around it. Humans are social. I don't think any one of you is going to like buy a cabin in the mountains of Montana and, nail up the door and that's it. I can't, we talk about how disappointed we are in people and we talk about how horrible it is to get betrayed. And yes, that is all true. But when it comes right down to it, for all of us, or the vast majority of us, other people are essential to our happiness. They just are. Okay. So it's not enough just to take care of myself. Right? That's an impoverished life. That's not the type of life I want to lead. I want to lead the richest life possible, materially, in terms of human connections, love. I want love. I want to be loved. I want to be the type of person who's capable of reciprocity in a relationship. I want to be the type of person who can be trusted. I want to be the type of person that other people feel comfortable working with. I want to be a good friend. I want to be a good parent. I want to be a good citizen. I want to be a good community member. When people like think about me after I'm not here anymore, I want people to say, hey, that guy changed my life for the better. And it was a pleasure having known that person. So if we want any of that stuff, and most of us do, what do we have to learn? We have to learn how to treat other people with respect. We need other people to pursue cooperative projects. We enjoy the benefits of socialization. We want to be loved. In order to achieve any of that, we have to learn to play well with others. And so, yes, ethics, morality is essential to my long-term well-being, right? In order to reap these benefits, we must learn to restrain our impulses and desires and abide by the principle of reciprocity. If I break every promise I make, people will stop taking me seriously. If I break my contracts, nobody will want to contract with me. If I don't show up on time ever when somebody needs something, People aren't going to be there for me when I need them. Folks, it's not rocket science. It's not. And so this brings us to our main principle here from morality is cooperation, the logic of cooperation. And here's our golden rule, if you want to say it's our golden rule. Whenever, right, whenever our actions harm others or have the potential to harm others, we should have good reasons for doing that. And if we don't, we shouldn't do it. I should be able to explain myself. I should be able to explain exactly what I'm doing and why in a way that anyone else could, in principle, agree with. And if I can't do that, if I can't give you a clear justification for my behavior, I have no business interfering with your well-being. And if I do anyway, I'm a bad person. I'm just a bad person. That's all there is to it. If I can't explain myself and I'm screwing with you in some way, well, I'm a bad person. Now, maybe like there are conflicts in society. Sometimes we have to interfere with somebody else's well-being, but we have good reasons for doing so. Okay. I get that. But if I'm just doing it because I want to, well, I'm a bad person. And again, you may say, so what, Professor? I'm a bad person. Well, the only person, like you're going to pay for that, I guess, because you're going to be deprived of cooperative partners and all the things that we talked about. Some people still don't care. I'm going to do whatever I want to, and nobody can stop me. Well, that's not necessarily true. We can stop you, and we should. And I would argue that we have a moral obligation to each other when somebody acts out in this way, that we do stop you, even if we have to use violence to do so. And every society has recognized that, because in every society, there is a justification for self-defense. There's a justification for dealing with people who continually and systematically violate the norms and the rules and harm other people. And maybe we incarcerate you, maybe we stone you to death, but we're coming for you. It has to be that way, right? It has to be that way for any society to function. So unjustified behavior not only eliminates the possibility of cooperation, which is bad enough. We can't build anything, we can't hunt, we can't make any art, we can't, because we're busy fighting, right? It may lead to conflict and violence, as most people will resist being coerced or treated unfairly. Now, there are masochistic people and that you can walk all over them, but not everybody is like that. And most people will resist, right? Most people will push back, and they should. You should push back. I mean, in a way, if you're allowing somebody to violate your rights or to walk over you and you're not responding to that, you're part of the problem. In a way, because you're encouraging the bad behavior, and people who act in that way aren't going to stop at you. They're going to move on to other people, and you're facilitating that, right? That's one way to look at it. And I mean, you could think of the example of cheating, like somebody cheats on an exam or something. Well, they're undermining the integrity of the system when they do that. And if you benefit from the system in any way, then that's a direct threat to you. And by simply looking the other way, you're facilitating that. And so when you lose out on those benefits, you have only yourself to blame. So it's all of our business. It is. It really is. Again, this has nothing to do with idealism or metaphysics. The logic of any large-scale system of cooperation imposes limits on our behavior. And in order to reap the long-term benefits of cooperation, we have to curb our impulses and desires. We just have to. Okay, so what are the benefits of living in an ethical society? Well, the benefits of living in an ethical society can be seen at the societal, organizational, and individual levels. So it's a win-win for everybody when we all follow the rules. It really is. First of all, unethical actions always produce negative externalities. That's a huge problem. Unethical actions always produce negative externalities in a social context. Now, what does that mean? What's a negative externality? And this is just a fancy term for something that happens when one party makes another party worse off, but doesn't bear the cost of doing so. Now, a really good example of a negative externality is, let's say, a factory that poisons the water supply or pollutes the air. Okay. So they increase their profits by pumping poisons into the water supply or polluting the air. Now, if they're not made to pay for that, as sometimes they're not, we're going to call that a negative externality. Why? Because society has to bear the cost of cleaning that up. So anytime somebody commits fraud, anytime somebody breaks contract or acts in a way that is deleterious to society, and they don't bear the cost of that directly, the cost falls on the rest of us to clean up, just like the pollution that is pumped into the air by the, unethical corporation. So unethical behavior always produces some type of cost on society, and society has to bear the cost of cleaning that up. Now, in contrast, ethical conduct always produces positive externalities. How so? Well, when people behave ethically, society needs to spend fewer resources enforcing rules. Think about that, right? It costs a lot of money, to pay police to watch the streets, to pay the SEC to monitor business transactions, all of this stuff. It costs money to do that. But if people just voluntarily followed the rules, we wouldn't need to spend all that money on enforcement. And we could take those resources and do something better with it, right? So the transaction cost of doing business would be lower if people just did what they were supposed to do. And probably most important, think about the terrible disasters that we've all lived through. The BP oil spill, when that oil rig caught on fire, the 2008 mortgage crisis. Folks, had people simply done their job and not looked the other way, these things would not have occurred. And if you think this is really abstract, ask yourself this question. How likely is it for you to be able to afford to buy a house? Whose fault is that? Okay? The 2008 mortgage crisis was facilitated by people looking the other way, people not doing what they were supposed to be doing. Regulators not regulating, business people being greedy, consumers being greedy. All of these things could have been avoided. This was not a natural disaster. And the economic collapse that followed was entirely a result of unethical behavior. Had people just done what they were supposed to do, none of that would have happened. And think about how much better your future would be. You are paying for the unethical behavior that occurred, 15 years ago. You're still paying for it. Organizations and businesses that behave ethically are much less likely to become embroiled in conflict and litigation. You are much less likely to be sued if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Unnecessary conflict can drain away time and resources that could be directed towards more productive activities. So if you're the kind of person that's getting sued all the time, you should ask yourself this question, why? Like, what kind of unethical practices am I engaging in that I am, inviting all of this litigation? And believe me, litigation is time. I'm a lawyer, so I know litigation is time consuming. It's expensive. And you probably would not be getting sued if you would have just done what you were supposed to do in the first place. Now, often my students will ask me, well, professor, why do we need ethics when we have law? And I think that's a pretty good question, right? Don't we have laws in place to stop people from behaving badly? And that's true. The legal system, is as long as it's functioning correctly, imposes a lot of duties. But the legal system can't impose or enforce all the duties it mandates. Think about this. Could the police prevent everybody from running stop signs and red lights? Could the police do that? What do you think? If everybody just said, I'm not going to stop, could the police? No, there's no way. There are too many drivers out there. It's just law enforcement doesn't have enough resources to do that. So what do we count on to ensure that our roads are safe? Do we count on law enforcement to ensure our roads are safe? No, we don't. What do we count on?
Us?
Yeah, each other. We count on each other. We count on the integrity of the people. Like, look, late at night, I will come to a red light and I will stop, even if I don't see any traffic around. Why? Because that's just what we do. That's how the system works. And I'll admit, I don't come to a complete stop at every stop sign. I mean, okay, you got me. But I try. Okay. I make an effort. And I know the system only works to the degree that people participate in the system. And look, here's the thing. Do you guys appreciate the fact that you can actually get in a crosswalk and walk across the street without being killed? Is that a good thing? Do you like that? You know that there are countries where that's not the case, where you take your life in your hands if you try to cross the traffic. Okay, the US has a functioning traffic system. We all benefit from that. So whose responsibility is it to maintain that? Ours. It's our, if we want to reap the benefits of traffic safety, it's our responsibility to ensure that we play by the rules. That's the answer. Even if law enforcement could enforce every rule, do we really want the government telling us what to do 24/7? No, that would be like living in North Korea. So it's up to us, right, It's up to us to enforce social norms and ethical norms. It shouldn't be up to the government to tell us to do that. We should be able to do that on our own, right? We should. Sam says, we the people. That's right. And it's not just benefits. Everybody thinks in terms of benefits. It's also responsibilities, right? And remember this, and this is important, okay? And I want you guys, as a lawyer, I'm going to tell you this. Not everything that is legal is good. Just because something is legal doesn't make it right, doesn't make it good. The lawful pursuit of profit can bring about great social harm. Okay, who's familiar with Purdue Pharma? Any of you guys familiar with Purdue Pharma, the company?
Sounds kind of familiar, but I don't know if I know the details.
Okay, you may have heard of this though, Alexa. How many of you have heard of Oxycontin
Yeah, definitely.
or oxycodone? Okay, so these were drugs made by Purdue Pharma. And Purdue Pharma made something called oxycodone. And oxycodone essentially is heroin. It's really what it is. And everybody knows heroin, right? I mean, I'm not saying that everybody is familiar with heroin, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a powerful drug and it's highly addictive. And it's also very dangerous. Well, oxycodone, same thing. Powerful drug, highly addictive, very dangerous. Doctors would only prescribe oxycodone in cases where the patient was terminal and had uncontrollable pain. Very powerful pain reliever, very powerful. Heroin's very powerful drug. Well, Purdue Pharma wanted to make more money. I mean, there's only so many people who are dying from cancer, right? And so they changed the formulary of the drug. They put an enteric coating on it, and they rebranded it as Oxycontin, but it was essentially the same drug. And somehow this was all legal. They convinced the Food and Drug Administration to approve it for sale for treating pain. And Purdue Pharma went to all of these doctors who had genuine concerns about giving heroin to people for back pain. And they convinced these doctors to prescribe it for just general pain. And Purdue Pharma made billions of dollars. And as a result of this purely legal scheme, what happened? What happened to those billions of people who were taking the drug?
They became addicted?
They became addicted. They became addicted. And so when you think of the fentanyl crisis or the oxycodone, all of that stuff, that was promoted by pharmaceutical companies trying to make a buck. Purely legal. Not much different from your ordinary drug dealer on the corner, is it? Right? So not everything that is legal is ethical. Not everything that is legal is good. So we need to have higher standards sometimes. Now, you'll often hear that ethical standards have to be impartial. Let me tell you why. And this follows from the logic of how we're going to apply ethics. Why is it essential that ethical rules be impartial? Well, think about this. Everyone, or the vast majority of people, might feel that their own well-being, including the well-being of their family and friends, is more important than anyone else's. That's understandable. Does anybody have kids?
Yes.
Charisma, you have kids?
Too.
Here's something, and I don't mean to, I mean, I'm sure your kids are wonderful. I'm sure they're great kids, but I think my kids are more important than your kids. I do. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. And you know what? I bet you feel the same way.
Yeah.
It's normal, right?
hmm
We all feel that way, right? Everybody, your kids are the most important kids. You're more important than anybody else. That's normal. That's human nature. That's the way we feel. Okay, great. Unfortunately, that makes terrible social policy, doesn't it? And really, honestly, if we let's put our objective hat on. And I hate to put you on the record because your kids might grow up and see this. But objectively, are your kids more important than anyone else's?
No.
Like objectively, my kids are terrible. I mean, how can they be? They're not important. No, I love them more than anything in the world. But I mean, if you really like, what reason do I have? What justification do I have that they're more important than anyone? I don't. Because they're not. My kids aren't. They're just kids like anybody else's. So if we think about this carefully, it's unreasonable to think you're more important than anybody else, right? It is.
Right.
It's unreasonable. There are no what do we mean by that? There's no good reasons why my interests are objectively more important than yours. Okay, let's think of an example. Racism. Everybody talks about racism, and it's terrible, right? Racism is terrible, but how often do we ask ourselves why? Like, what is it about racism that is morally objectionable? And if we think about it carefully, it's obvious. The racist person says, well, my group is better than your group. Well, what do we want to ask that person?
What makes your group so much better?
Exactly. And what's the obvious answer?
There isn't one.
Yes. So it gets the same thing. It's like when I think that I'm more important than you are, or my group is more important than yours, there's no justification for that at all. So it's wrong. Right? It's wrong. So here we get to this idea of impartiality. When we make rules, they have to be impartial. Why? Because there's no justification for doing it otherwise. I'll give you an example. When my oldest son was 5, we were downtown at one of these parks. I think it was the one like the off of Yosemite Street. And there was a thing like a big wheel that you could hang on, and he was hanging on this wheel, and we were spinning the wheel, and he slipped off the wheel, right? He just fell off the wheel. He's like, and he fell off the wheel. And he landed awkwardly and he broke his arm. And it was really clear his arm was broken. I looked at it, I was like, oh no, that's not good. And he was in a lot of pain. And I was starting to panic, but I got him in the car and I took him down to Dameron ER. Any of you guys been to Dameron ER ever? Or maybe St. Joe's or the county hospital?
Yes, I've been there.
Yeah, okay. What's it like?
Busy.
Yeah. Oh, it's quiet and it's ordered. No, it's chaotic, right? And this was like really crazy time. And there were people in there, like there's a guy, like blood was coming out of his head and somebody was having a heart attack and there was all kinds of things going on. But you know what? When I walked in there and my son was in so much pain, what did I want?
Him to be treated right away or seen.
Right away. I wanted him to go right to the front of the line. I did. And I was kind of pissed off that he didn't. They were like, okay, yeah, have a seat. I'm like, but don't you know my son is in pain? Now, that was the emotional part of my brain. What did the like the rational part of my brain, what was it thinking? This is how it has to be done. Uh, you know, I want my kid to have priority over everyone else because he's my kid. But that's not a system that can work, is it? So what's the system that can work when it comes to who should be seen in the hospital first?
Who is more injured?
Paul, that's the only way to do it, right? I think that's the only rational thing to do. So regardless of who you are, we're gonna say, yeah, we're gonna do the old titration thing, and we're gonna say the triage, right? Not the triage thing, and we're gonna say who needs to be seen first. Now, doesn't this benefit me in the long run?
Yeah, because if you're ever injured badly, they're going to treat you right away.
So isn't this the right thing to do?
Yeah.
See how simple this is? Now, even if I don't like it, even if like intuitively I think it's but like rationally, if I think about the reasons, then I have to admit that this is fair. See, this is what impartiality means. When we apply an ethical rule, it has to be implied impartially. If there are no compelling reasons for treating people differently, then don't treat them differently. If there are no competing or compelling reasons for treating people differently, then discrimination is unacceptably arbitrary. Again, this is just the logic of cooperation. Okay. Now we get to this very interesting material from Paul Bloom, who works at Yale. He's a researcher at Yale. And he says, we tend to think of babies, human infants, as blobs who are incapable of doing anything, but that's not true. Bloom's research suggests that young babies, as young as 3 months or 6 months, are capable of making value judgments, which suggests that there are moral intuitions about fairness. And I hope that you guys read that. It's some very interesting research. And there are some things on YouTube too, if you're really fascinated with that. There's a good 60 Minutes episode on this. And the stuff that they've done with babies about preferences and punishment and fairness and bias as well is very, very interesting. Right. And it's fascinating research. So the upshot of this is that human morality has a component that is innate and a component that is learned. So human morality starts with what we are born with. Babies are, in fact, moral beings equipped with compassion, empathy, the capacity to judge the actions of others, and even some rudimentary understanding of fairness. And we're not alone in this. There are animals who have a rudimentary understanding of fairness as well. There's some really interesting experiments with capuchin monkeys, and capuchin monkeys love grapes. And they do these experiments where they start giving all the monkeys cucumbers. And the monkeys will eat the cucumbers, but they don't particularly like them. But then they'll start giving the monkeys grapes. And if they give the monkeys grapes for a while, and then they selectively stop giving one of the monkeys grapes, they give him a cucumber instead of a grape. If another monkey gets a grape, the monkey that gets the cucumber will actually take the cucumber and throw it right at the researcher. And this, of course, suggests that, like, even some non-human animal species have a rudimentary understanding of fairness, which is interesting, right? That just may be a condition of socialization, or a condition for socialization. Like to be a social animal, you have to have that. So this brings us to a kind of common sense definition of a common sense morality, or what we're programmed with. So we can see morality as a set of psychological capacities shaped by biological and cultural adaptation to promote cooperation and discourage selfishness. A set of psychological capacities shaped by biological and cultural adaptation to promote cooperation and discourage selfishness. And that's all we're dealing with here. So at the psychological level, we know that morality is implemented primarily through emotional reactions. It's not really a question of having good reasons, per se. At the psychological level, at least, morality is mostly implemented through emotional reactions. We value the interest of some people and don't value the interest of others, but those decisions are basically made at the level of emotional processing. And so good and bad feelings, I mean, after all, this is what natural selection uses to goad animals into approaching things or avoiding things. Right? Emotions guide behavior. We did get smarter over time, but rationality has not displaced the primary role of affective states on decision making. We make decisions on for almost purely emotional reasons. We have preferences based purely on emotions. So think about this. Why is this mouse in danger? It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It is, though.
It's sitting on top of a trap.
Yeah. Why doesn't it realize that? Well, it has a strong biological, right? We think of, right, emotions guide behaviors, right? The cheese is a fantastically overpowering stimulus. But if there was a cat there, would the mouse still approach the cheese?
Probably not.
No way. No way. Right? Just the scent of a predator would send this mouse running. Why?
Because it's a bigger emotion than the one to eat the cheese.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And why is it a bigger emotion?
Survival instinct?
Yeah, I mean, that's its programming. And that programming has been, reliable for, hundreds of thousands, not millions of years, going back in this mouse's, evolutionary genealogy, right? That's a very basic, the fear from seeing the predator is going to override the desire for the calories, because those calories are temporary, right? But the predator can just end you. There's a great, like, biologists have this saying. They go like, the prey, the predator runs for its dinner, but the prey runs for its life. So it has a bigger incentive, right, to get out of there. But the trap is lethal, isn't it, Paul? Isn't the trap just as
that
lethal?
trap's lethal, but the mouse doesn't know it.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't have the programming to recognize it. And maybe if mice have to coexist with traps for tens of thousands of years, maybe that will change. But right now, there's nothing in the mouse brain, right, to warn it that this is a danger, because that's not its heritage. It's vulnerable. And if you think that we're smarter than mice, not really. You see this stuff, what do you think? So look, our ancestors lived in an environment of caloric scarcity. What does that mean? It means they didn't know where the next meal was coming from. And this is the environment that humans ancestors lived in for hundreds of thousands of years. And so when our brains has an opportunity to eat, what does it say?
Do it. Eat.
Yeah, all you can, because you don't know if that food will be there tomorrow. What's our particular problem, though?
That we have too much food and then this food is not healthy. It just fills it up and it doesn't really fill us up with anything good.
But that's really, really new in our experience, isn't it? And so,
Yeah.
we're not equipped with the machinery to tell us this is bad. And so we overeat. And it's a real problem. And this does kill people, right? So emotions guide us, but we're kind of trapped by the repertoire of emotions that we're programmed with. And that can be good and that can be bad. I mean, think about, look, our primary motivation is, after all, feelings. We may buy a parka on the basis of extensive hours of online research. I know that's me. I get on Amazon and I comparison shop, and I love to do that. But in the end, why do we really buy something? Why do we really buy things? Charisma?
It's like pleasure or something.
It makes us feel good. That's it. That's all there is to it. We do what makes us feel good. And that's really as complex as it is. And then we can support that with reason, with justification, which is what we do after the fact. After we've decided to do something, we'll come up with a lot of reasons why we're doing it. But we can't escape this. We're primarily motivated by feelings. And some of those feelings are good. They attract us to things. And some of those feelings are bad. They push us away from things. Now, why is this a problem? Well, so psychologists who study this have pointed out a real problem with this. Our emotions trigger moral judgments. Our emotions trigger moral judgments. So perceived moral violations evoke contempt, shame, anger, fear, or disgust. Whenever we feel bad, there's the possibility, let's put it this way. Things that make us feel bad, we have a tendency to say they are bad. Do you see that? If something makes us feel bad, we have a tendency to say, oh, that thing is bad. And that might not necessarily be the case, right? So if something makes us feel contempt or shame or anger or fear or disgust, we will tend to see that thing as being wrong or bad or evil. So there's a relationship between emotion and moral judgment that is not always a healthy relationship. It can be difficult here's something we should always remember. It can be difficult to rationally override our feelings once a strong emotion is triggered. Once I feel shame or fear or anger or disgust, it can be difficult to override that rationally. And so this creates problems. Let me give you an example that was used by the psychologist Jonathan Haidt, and you'll see this, I think, immediately. Catherine works in a medical lab. One day, while processing fresh tissue samples from a human cadaver, curious about the taste of human flesh, she takes a little bite of the meat. Is that wrong?
Yes.
Other
No,
people, is that wrong? It's gross. Emma, sure. Yeah, it's gross. But is it wrong?
no,
Most people, the overwhelming majority of people will say that this is wrong. Morally wrong. Now, Jonathan Haidt, he gets his students in the class and he asks them this question. They're all like, oh yeah, this is wrong. This is terrible. You shouldn't do this. She's a terrible person for doing this. Now, what's the question we want to ask though? Why? Emma says it's objectively no, but it's indicative of cannibalistic desire, which could be threatening others. Okay, that's one way to look at it. I like that. So why is it wrong if you think it's wrong?
I feel like the reason why I would find it wrong is just because it could be endangering her health, which then could endanger other people's health. It's like she gets sick from eating it. But other than that, I don't.
Yeah, the tissue samples are sterilized.
Okay, in that case, I don't know if I care at all.
Alexa, do you think it's gross?
I mean, yeah, I find it gross, but yeah, like I don't know. If they want to do it, then they would want to do it. Like that's fine.
Yeah, okay. I like that. I like that. This is very tough. Haight's thesis is like once disgust is triggered, it's very, very difficult to see this in any other context other than being just this is bad. Why? Because it makes us feel bad. Now, if this one doesn't get you, Haight has a lot of other examples. Like one thing, like would you wear Charles Manson's sweater? This is the kind of things that he does to his class. He asks these questions. And they're like, no, I wouldn't. That's terrible, or Hitler's coat or Hitler's hat. You're like, no, you wouldn't do that. Why? Just a hat. Again, once emotions are triggered, it's hard to rationally override that. So why should we care about this? Obviously, nobody's going to be eating human tissue in a lab, things like that. Okay, this is why we should care. Because our moral brains are adapted for cooperation within small groups, not large collectives or between different groups. So when we think about bias, in-group, out-group bias, if the stranger triggers fear or disgust or anger, what are we likely to think about the stranger? We are likely to think that they're bad. They're bad people. They're dangerous. You see how this works? Our moral intuitions work very well within small groups. That makes sense. We lived in small groups. We are adapted to small groups. Our Paleolithic ancestors lived in small groups. But we only started very recently living in large urbanized contexts. And we interact with strangers on a daily basis. If we were on the Paleolithic savanna, we would hardly ever see strangers. And when we did, they were probably threats. But that's not true for us. So Latoya, what about moral principles? I'm sorry, I didn't see your comment, Latoya. And it's hard for me to put that in context now since I'm late. I'm late. Okay, sorry. I try to keep an eye on that. I hate to take people out of context because then I misunderstand what they're saying. So the bottom line is there's good reasons to distrust our moral intuitions. We think strangers are bad. We think strangers are dangerous just because they're different, that they're a threat. That may not necessarily be the case, and in fact, probably isn't. But our moral intuitions, that's where they go. And there's lots of problems. I mean, when you think about our moral, let's think about empathy for a minute. Empathy is a good thing, right? Is it? Is it really? Yeah, Latoya says, well, I don't know. The professor, you like to trick us. Maybe, perhaps it is. Well, let's think about empathy. What are the problems with empathy? Again, a moral intuition. No surprise. If you're surprised by this, where have you been? We are much more empathetic towards people who are like us. Yeah. And there's lots of data on that. So we tend to be empathetic towards people that are just like we are. Like if we have the same background, if we're from the same in group, if we can relate to them, we're empathetic towards them. Empathy makes us focus on individual cases, but sometimes we ignore the larger picture. And people who are soliciting money for third world causes know this. And so they won't tell you about a famine that is threatening 10,000 people. What will they do? They'll show you a picture of a single child. And they'll say, yes, you could save this child. And that triggers our empathy because it's very difficult for us to think about the big picture, right? But we can connect with a single person. And so empathy makes it almost impossible to focus on the larger context. Empathy is actually easily exhausted. We have only a limited supply of it. Some of us more than others, but everybody's supply of empathy is limited. And empathy can trick us into believing that feeling is more important than actually doing something. And we see a lot of this. We see a lot of feelings about issues, but no direct action that is really ameliorating the causes of those issues. And that's an empathy trap. I'm going to give you an example, and it's going to make you hate me a little bit. Or at least question me. Okay, I'm going to give you an example of this empathy thing and how maybe it's good, but not as good as we think it is. The Bat Kid. Okay, this happened a few years ago. Make-A-Wish, great foundation, kids who have terminal diseases. right? They get, they get to live out like one last big thing, and Make-A-Wish makes this all possible. It's great. So a few years ago, there was a sick kid, and his dream was to be Batman. And so essentially they shut down the whole city, and they spent a lot of money to make this kid Batman. Now, who could hate on this story? Who could hate on this? What a great story, right? But I mean, if we think about this objectively, wouldn't that money have been better used to, marginally influence the lives of a lot of kids rather than one kid? Right? I mean, was that the best use of resources? I don't know. But like, this is, I think, the problem of empathy is we focus on this one kid, and then we push everything else to the side, and we don't see the bigger picture. So yeah, I'm not against the bad kid. I think this is great. It's a fun story, but maybe those resources could have been better used in a larger context. So the limitations on our moral intuitions make moral reasoning necessary. And again, I think it's unavoidable. When we have these blind spots in our moral intuition, we have to fill that with theory. And this is the second part of our moral life. It has emerged over the course of our development as a species. It is the product of culture, our imagination, and our capacity for reasoning. We are born to be moral, but our values are shaped by culture and learning, right? So the bottom line when it comes to human beings are social by nature, but our natural altruism is limited to family and cooperative partners. This default form of human morality is universal to all forms of cultures and historical periods. Our preference for family and cooperative partners can be overridden, however, by institutions that provide incentives for other types of altruistic behavior. For example, favoring a qualified stranger over a genetic relative. But we will revert to our natural preferences when institutions break down. What about morality and evolutionary biology, which is an interesting field? Well, conceptualizing morality as a form of behavior opens the possibility of observing it in other species. Indeed, if complex features did evolve gradually, one might expect to find stages of various precursors in organisms besides humans. And this is exactly what we see. So when we think of non-human primates in particular, Pan-Paniscus and Pan-Troglodytes, chimpanzees and bonobos, orangutans as well. They are capable of many things once considered to be uniquely human. They make tools, they display empathy, they discern the intentions and goals of others, and they form friendships and partnerships. Many researchers have claimed that some non-human primates display sympathy and compassion, kindness, toleration, patience, and their negative counterparts such as anger, indignation, malice, and spite, and a sense of what is fair and what is not fair. So when we talk about the development of human morality, biologists often will cite nepotistic altruism and reciprocal altruism. So nepotistic altruism is common in nature. And this is the idea that natural selection has shaped altruistic behavior towards one's close relatives to enhance the survival of mutually shared genes. And we see this everywhere in nature. But there's also reciprocal altruism. And this is altruistic behavior whereby an organism acts with the expectation that another organism will reciprocate in the future. And we do see this with primates. And this is cooperative behavior over time. And so individuals that live in the same group will help each other, right? But there's a dark side to cooperation as well. Intergroup cooperation developed in response to competitive pressures between rival groups. So we should not expect empathy to operate well between strangers, and it does not, even in humans. Particularly with pan troglodytes with chimpanzees, we see organized violence. And that is not surprising. Chimps actually wage war on one another over territory and resources. And that's not just a uniquely human behavior. We see we see cooperation in chimps, but we also see organized violence. Now, Pan-paniscus bonobos are just as closely related to us as chimps. And bonobos have an entirely different strategy for socialization. When one group of bonobos encounters another community, females from the group will commingle with the outsiders. They will engage in sexual behaviors with both males and females. And not surprisingly, this manages to diffuse tension between the groups. So bonobos are all about making love, not war. And so that's a very interesting as well. And so when we ask ourselves the question, are human beings, compared to our cousins, are we more like chimps or more like bonobos? Well, it's a complicated question, isn't it? Human biology, ecology, and culture interact in ways that allow humans to be the most violent, despicable beings on Earth. But we also are the planet's most compassionate and cooperative creatures. So we're complicated. And this also suggests that we have a lot of control over the kind of society that we live in. Okay, well, man, we did it. We made it through another lecture, and I'm excited. And I hope that you're excited as well. I hope this stuff is interesting to you. And I will see you guys tomorrow. And I'm so grateful that you guys hang out with me, and I try to have gratitude in my life, and the opportunity to